Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast, Cry, Laugh, Eat, Making Friends with Your Emotions. We want to give a big shout out and hello to all our listeners in Estonia. We're so excited.
Hello.
Hello. We're excited that you join us. We have people around the world joining in with us, and bit by bit, we're going to try to acknowledge you all.
And that's Helen. And my name is Ruth. Welcome to our episode. Just so much has happened emotionally and interesting because most of it comes under surprise, the emotion surprise. So we're actually going to look at some counsel from surprise. And in our book called Making Friends with Your Emotions, surprise says this: I am the voice in your head that tells you to explore and to analyse. Now, why have we chosen that? Well, because that's what's been happening this weekend. Mm-hmm. I don't even know where to begin, Helen.
Well, yes. Do you want to share with us what's happened for you?
Okay, I'll go through it super quickly, listeners, and you may have experienced this yourself. And so I'm really hoping, we're both hoping, that this really helps you. If you're going through it, if you've been through it, or if you go through it in the future. Yeah. So last Thursday, I got a phone call from my younger brother, and he told me that our oldest brother in New Zealand had been told that he had stomach cancer and also cancer of the liver. So that was Thursday, and that was quite a shock to everyone. He's always been an extremely fit, healthy man, and even though he's 75, he's like a 50-year-old. He just walks everywhere. He's just incredibly fit and healthy. So that was the first shock. Then on Friday, I received communication from my New Zealand family that my oldest brother was in a lot of pain and they had given him morphine at home. Then on Saturday, I received more communication from my family, and they said an ambulance arrived and took him to the hospital. And then on Sunday, the doctors at the hospital said to my family in New Zealand, could you please gather the family? He has a few days left. Now, today is Monday, so we are 5 days away from that first phone call. Each subsequent piece of communication has been an element, I suppose, of surprise. Like, it was initially shock, but I think the greatest shock came today, Monday, 5 days later, after his first diagnosis. And that was that he passed away. So from Thursday to Monday, it's been such a shock. It's really blown our family apart. And I know that there are many listeners out there who would have experienced this in their own lives. And some of you may have experienced other types of shock. And shock is one of the faces or elements of surprise. And so we just want to look at shock because it's a very interesting and very intense feeling that is surprise-based.
And thanks for sharing that, Ruth, because today's a hard day. Ruth is flying off to New Zealand tomorrow to be with family. And we had another podcast planned, but we felt to just be real today. And I'm grateful to Ruth for being real. And
I'm so thankful for my friend Helen. She's like one of the emotions. She just sits there and she's helping and supporting, and it's wonderful. Yeah, so it's great if you have a good friend that you can actually vomit over.
And, you know, it's not always easy when someone's going through something so hard to actually know what to do. And you can feel inadequate as a friend or a family member. And I think this morning we had that experience. Normally Ruth would be coming in, we would work today. And we spoke on the phone, then I had to do something else, and then we spoke again. And I didn't want to intrude at all on her. And yet I did really want to be there for her. But I think my reaction to Ruth's shock was to pull away. She didn't yet have the news that her brother had passed away. I was going to pick her up, but I said, oh, look, I won't get in the way. And Ruth was trying to be polite and not intrude on me. I was trying to be polite and not intrude on Ruth. But I'm really grateful because she just was honest after that and said, I really need you just to be here. And I was so happy to be. But I guess what I want to share with the listeners today is I didn't do anything amazing. I simply sat there and listened. And the beautiful thing is, when I went, I picked up Ruth where she was, and I was there the moment she got the phone call, which happened within a minute, maybe 2 minutes of me arriving to be where Ruth was. And then she got the phone call that her brother had passed away. So I was there for her to cry on my shoulder, and all I was there. We went somewhere and had a drink and talked. And
I love that you shared that, Helen, because listeners out there, if someone you know and love actually goes into shock, there are several things that are important for a person when they're in shock. And one of them was, as Helen said, it's just being there, making sure, first of all, physically, that they are safe. For example, sometimes when you go into shock, I mean, what happens to you, Helen, when you go into shock? And listeners, can you think of a time when you went into shock and how did your body respond?
I think it's like freezing.
It does.
Inside. You don't know what to think, how to feel. It's like everything is just paused.
It is. It's like everything stops for a moment. It's all in a freeze frame. And that's how shock affects some people.
Let's have a little explore what happens when we go into shock, when our body goes into shock. So when we go into shock, our blood flow slows down and the cells and organs don't get as much oxygen.
It feels like that, doesn't it? You kind of get a little bit, it's like you don't breathe. There's a breathlessness about it.
What happens then is the body releases the emergency hormone known as adrenaline, and that's when your heart will start to beat faster. And the adrenaline is your body's emergency response. What you might be feeling then is that your body is sending more blood to the muscles and to the brain and increases your blood pressure. It can increase your energy, and I guess that emergency response is to get you ready to act.
It's funny, isn't it, that it does that. It slows everything down. Then it speeds everything up. And then all of a sudden it gives you this burst of energy. And when I think about it, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And the burst of energy isn't the kind of energy where you want to dance on the tables and have a party. It's the kind of energy that you feel a tension. It's a real tension in the muscles, like you could leap off something, and yet at the same time, amongst all that, you're actually quite frozen. So all that's happening, and I think if you didn't have that increase of energy, you'd probably faint. Do you know what I mean? And maybe some people do.
That's it, and that's why the emergency release of adrenaline, to increase your blood flow and to keep you alive.
It's just so fascinating, isn't it? The surprise emotion and what it does, what it triggers in physiologically and psychologically in your body. Yes.
And I guess for somebody who's beside someone going through that, it can be confusing to know what to do. And I think the first thing is, as we were saying before, just be there. Just put your arm around them, just sit next to them, listen if they're talking away, or quietly speak to them and reassure them.
There's also a possibility of fainting and a drop in temperature, which is why you'll often see paramedics put a blanket around someone who's in shock. You have to keep their body warm, keep the body temperature the same. So if you are standing with someone or you're sitting with someone who is in shock, it's a good idea to make sure they're warm, make sure physically they're safe, and also sometimes a sweet. Just releasing the sugar slowly into their system helps to calm everything down as well.
Yes, and having said that, that's what we did. I met Ruth, and then she got the call. I was very grateful to be there, so she wasn't alone.
And then we went to a cafe.
We did go to a cafe, and Ruth was trembling, and on the way, a family member called, and Ruth spoke to them while I drove, and I could see her hands trembling. And when we hopped out of the car to go to the cafe, because Ruth felt she just needed to get a drink, when we went to the cafe, you actually held tight to me because you actually nearly dropped.
Oh, did I? I didn't even notice.
Yeah,
and so that's
you nearly fell.
It's another sign, and what's happening to your body is that I couldn't actually stop the trembling.
No.
It was really interesting. I tried to, and in the end I sort of folded my arms to keep my hands firm. But that's just another sign. And all these are physical symptoms from shock. And, of course, that's surprise-based. So why? Why surprise a friend? Why is this happening when you go into shock? From the perspective of the person in shock, which was me this morning, something I realised as I started to sort of calm down. I had my sugar, I was warm, and I was in a better space in some ways. I did start to, I guess, explore and analyse. And I realised from this last weekend and this morning that that's one of the greatest values of surprise, is that it says stop. Now, if I hadn't stopped, say I had just ignored all those feelings, I would have continued perhaps doing everything, going to work, ignoring what was happening, saying, no, I'm fine. And that doesn't give you time to process the emotion and what's happening. And for me, surprise is a wonderful friend because it says stop, and then it triggers thoughts so that you can just sit for a moment, give it space, take in what's happened, give yourself time. It's great that the body actually just kind of stops for a moment because you have to stop and you have to think about things, which is what we did, isn't it?
It's definitely what we did. And I think, again, I'd like to say to listeners, as a friend or family member of someone experiencing that, there's nothing necessarily you can do or say. It's simply being there. It's simply the other person will share if they feel to, cry if they feel to, and if they don't, they're just in a safe place with you. It actually doesn't matter. Just do what feels right at the time.
I think what I've learned from this weekend, and particularly from this morning, is that shock, if you allow it to be and just sit through it, it's actually an incredible, I don't know what the word is, Helen. It's just that all I know is that it's helped me to get through the bad news, if that makes sense.
Well, it does, and I'm witness to that in watching you through the shock, the whole shock the last few days, and then the big shock today.
It's surprise in that sense has just given me time, and I am flying out tomorrow, but I feel so much stronger after today. And I mean, of course, there'll be grief to deal with because, as we said last week, surprise always precedes another strong emotion. And yes, there is sadness, and I know that there'll be grieving in the next few months, which I will sit with, and it will teach me more lessons. But currently, right now, surprise has been amazing because it's given me space and time to be still and to process everything, to analyse, to explore just what's happening and how I'm going to deal with it. And I'm very, very blessed, listeners, because I have Helen here to be able to be physically present with me and emotionally present and spiritually present, and I can just say all those things to her. And I do hope you can talk to someone too if you need to.
And never forget, wherever you live, I would say most places, look up on the internet if you have no one, and try one of those phone lines or chat lines where there is space to talk to someone, and they are usually free. We have looked up, and most countries have a free counselling line. I think the thing I want to share too is we always talk about waves, surfing the waves of emotion. There's been so many waves for Ruth. There are so many waves, especially at a time of loss. So you might think Ruth sounds incredibly strong, and she is right now, but she may well have a massive wave tonight when she goes to bed and is alone, and that wave will come back and there'll probably be a lot of tears, or when she's with her children later and sees their grief, and when she talks with her family, when she flies there tomorrow, there'll be mountains of tears ahead in the next days and weeks. And
that's okay too.
That's what I was about to say. It truly is okay because they will come and go, and to suppress them it just hurts.
It's
actually,
the worst
doesn't it?
thing.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing to suppress emotions.
Yeah.
I'm an expert on that.
But what's beautiful is this morning when I met Ruth and was there when she got the news, she did let some emotions out and we held each other tight, and then we've laughed. There's been tears. I've been beside her as she's talked with family.
We've eaten.
Yes, we've eaten.
We've cried.
Yeah, that's right. I just want to say it's okay, whatever comes. We've laughed at silly things at the same time, which also releases some feelings and some tension. So emotions are okay. They are your friend. And at times like this, there will be many coming and going.
So, listeners, as we conclude, we just want you to know that, like Helen said, the emotions, in particular the one we're discussing today, shock, it's actually there to help you. Mm-hmm. It's there to help you keep still and just process things, explore them, analyse them on your way to healing.
That's it.
And we love you to pieces.
We do. And thank you for coming to be with us.
Yeah, we really love and appreciate you all, and are grateful to those that have let us know that they're enjoying our podcast. We would so love to hear from you. Please send us a note and we'll say goodbye.
We will say goodbye.
And we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Body releases adrenaline, and that's when your heart will start to beat faster and you
Go and have an ice cream.
That's right, that you go and eat cake.